on.
fine.
I think we might actually finally be live. Let me check to make sure that we are live. Come on. Come on. Oh, no, there's a network error. Oh, that's good. That's fantastic. Come on. Come on. You know you want to. I'm not offline. I'm online. You know I'm online.
Yeah, Stephen, if you're listening, we're just having technical errors because Twitch is being a bitch.
Yes. We are. Hang on. Yes.
He's trying to fight a paywall, which sounds pretty sus to begin with. But yeah, I was just recounting the whole raccoon story, how I had to, I had to save the raccoon from our cat, and then I had to save our cat from the raccoon, while we were talking about Candyman.
I mean, just briefly, I wanted to say I love Dune.
Oh.
Dune, your mom.
And we're finally live. We're finally live. And we're finally live.
I could make an insensitive joke about, you know, your mom's surgery and how I was the cause of it, but I'm not going to stoop to that level.
Yeah, maybe not. Speaking of which, I won't be joining you gentlemen tonight. My mother is actually having neck surgery, so I'll be missing out on this one. I wish you guys the best.
Quick thoughts on all four films. Go. Now that we're live.
Okay.
Quick thoughts.
Legend, I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. Rocky Horror, I'm giving it a 7 out of 10, and It, I'm giving a solid 5.5.
Fair enough.
Dune, I'm giving it a 7.5. I mean, I enjoyed Dune. I thought it was okay. I think that it might just be a little bit overhyped.
Well, it's a little bit dry, and it is only half of the book. So,
and I think there's something to be said for the fact that I understand that this is like you need to see it in IMAX. You need to experience it, and I get that. But at some point, I wonder if this is a film that I need to experience in a theater. Is this what, like Scorsese was talking about?
Yes.
The amusement parks.
I don't know 100%. 2001: A Space Odyssey. Devon, what experience was better? Was it much better seeing it in the theater or okay seeing it in DVD? Which would you prefer?
Well, you know what? They were both very different, but both very worthwhile experiences. The first time I saw 2001 was on a DVD player on a really shitty little screen, and somehow I found the film a little transcendental from there. But I didn't feel like I really, really saw it until I saw the 70mm prints of it.
Well, and I mean, here's
exactly.
my thing. I mean, I saw 2001 on a 55-inch flat screen TV, right?
Yeah.
And it was incredible, right? And it's like, I mean, even Scorsese talked about...
I feel like Dune would still be a good movie, even if you watch it on a TV screen. Like, yeah, they want you to go to the cinema, but that's because cinemas aren't doing well. And that's the main reason.
Here's the other thing. I saw Interstellar when it first came out theatrically on 70mm. And in that experience, it felt like a transcendental, emotional experience, and I really was enveloped in it. Now I see it on TV all the time, and it's like a space melodrama. You know, so the medium is the message. I'm going to quote Marshall McLuhan that the medium...
You know nothing of my work.
No, but like, no, seriously, the way and how you watch a film does affect how you see it, in a technical and very and metaphysical sense. Like, it does play into it. So
I can agree with that. I do wish you guys the best of luck tonight. I will just briefly, say before I log off that next week I will definitely be here this Tuesday because we're going to be talking about my poll selected episode that I put in the poll and everybody voted for it because they love me.
I'm going to try and watch Titan 2 for that episode because the theme is normal sex equals boring.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So we're going to be talking about...
Stephen, if you can manage it, I know you have a lot of things to tend to at home right now. But if you wanted to just type out your piece of what you wanted to say about Legend, or at least the main bullet points, we'll go over them just because I know that was something you worked on.
I may do that off the air next Thursday. I know in the Discord server we do an off the air discussion and kind of go over thoughts if somebody missed out. So this is a good segue to tell you all listening at home, join the Discord. Get to be a part of the community.
Yeah. There you can make episode requests. Be part of all the discussions. There's a lot of recent news that we've been going over quite a bit. This whole Alec Baldwin situation. So if you want to hear our hot takes on that situation, tune in to Off the Air. We're going to talk about it inevitably.
If you're watching us for YouTube, you can join our Discord group in the description below. I'll make sure to add the link into the description.
Definitely.
Definitely check us out.
Yeah, so this Tuesday we'll be talking about Cronenberg's Crash, Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut, and a little-known 80s monster body horror gem called Society. And we're gonna get a load of this Society.
But I thought that was a Joker movie.
No,
it's not also a Society movie?
Yeah, well, it's the Society cinematic universe. It's a Society 1989.
That explains it.
Yeah, there you go.
It's like the spin-off of How to Get Ahead in Advertising.
Exactly.
If you've ever seen that movie.
Yeah, right. Well, it's you see, it's there's the Sigma Male cinematic universe, which is like Drive and Fight Club. And have you guys seen these memes?
Oh God.
Anyway.
Steven, you keep flooding my inbox with these goddamn memes. My DMs are just...
I'm sorry, you of all people are lecturing others for memes? Am I hearing that right?
Yes, you're hearing that right.
All the trilogies that I suggest on this podcast are memes.
That's very true. That's very true.
Anyway,
Steven, have a great night, buddy. Make sure you can watch our episode on YouTube to hear our thoughts on this. You may hate me after this episode, you may not. We will see.
All right. Good
night,
night,
have a great
everybody.
night, man. All right. Now for the official intro. I'm leaving all of that in. I am not cutting that up. I'm leaving that in. 3, 2, 1. The spice must flow. And welcome to the 54th episode and final Halloween special of Tuesdays with Moire, otherwise known as Spicy Bracket Tim Curry. So sorry about the wait, everybody. I had some issues with Twitch that I had to sort out. I had to put in a new stream key, even though they didn't tell me they gave me a new stream key. It's a long story, but anyways, better late than never. I'm your host, Ian Taylor. Stephen Beason was on earlier, but he sadly won't be able to make it tonight. He does have his own personal issues to sort out, but we wish him a very happy Halloween nonetheless. But I am joined tonight by my awesome co-host, Devon King. How are you doing tonight, buddy?
I'm doing all right. It's a cold autumn evening. I'm standing out on the back deck wearing my Blade Runner jacket. So I am a living meme. I didn't get the Drive jacket. I got the.
Are we talking Kay's jacket or Deckard's jacket?
Yeah, Kay's jacket. The ironic thing about it is I bought it from this website, like Film Jackets, I think, and they make like these film jackets for kind of cheap. This isn't a plug for them. This is just the fact. And what's funny is that it's made of leather, and in the Blade Runner universe, like leather is this thing you can't get anymore because animals have gone extinct or whatever. But if anything, my jacket's probably of higher quality than what he has.
Is that who you're dressing up as for Halloween too? Dressing up as
might as well. I wore the same jacket last year actually, and I just had some like half mask thing. So it's like it's an original character that's just kind of hodgepodge from other characters.
Makes sense.
Oh yeah,
nice.
It's literally just whatever I have around the house. I'll just throw it on.
I'd tell you what I'm wearing for Halloween, but then Matt would watch this episode and find out, and I don't want him to know until his party on Saturday. So It's a surprise. Sorry, Matt.
Dang.
Sorry to disappoint you, buddy. But speaking of, go on.
I wish I could go. I don't know. Maybe we'll see.
It's a pretty big party at the moment, but it's you're more than welcome to come and hang out if you're able
Yeah, I
to.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's nice that we're able to kind of get together again after all this COVID stuff. I mean,
Exactly. We'll
I think everybody's felt kind of socially isolated and kind of coming out of your shell can be a little difficult. And I like that we can get together without killing each other.
And if you want to come to London on the 31st, I wouldn't mind seeing Last Night in Soho with somebody. Be a great way to celebrate.
That would be.
We can go in our costumes. Be pretty sweet.
Yes. I am planning to see a certain film where we thought we were squeeze a little discussion in again on Friday. I'm planning to see it with my buddy Greg.
That's a good segue, because the first film we're talking about is Dune. There will be no spoilers. We will try to keep this a spoiler-free discussion. If I slip anything into it, I do apologize in advance, but this is a mostly spoiler-free discussion of Denis Villeneuve's incredibly ambitious adaptation of Dune, a novel written by Frank Herbert that has inspired such stories such as Star Wars, Game of Thrones, many different novels that inspired Warhammer 2, apparently. Hugely inspirational, but also considered by many to be unadaptable. I haven't really... Devon's mic is echoing on Twitch. That's great. Awesome.
Oh, is it not going through at all? Like you're not hearing me at all?
No, we can hear you, but it's echoing. But I can't hear an echo on my end. That's what's confusing me.
Who's letting us know?
Stephen.
Oh, lovely.
Thank you for that catch, Stephen.
Echo!
Echo! I don't know what to do to fix that. Twitch has just been a pain in the fucking ass today. Man.
I just unplugged and plugged my mic back in. Does that make any difference?
Steven, is that better? If you're hearing us. Is it still echoing? Is it echoing on my end or just Devon's?
Echo!
Echo!
Ricola!
Let us know. Sorry, guys. Twitch has been Twitch. Ever since they got hacked, it's just went downhill from here. Oh.
Can only go up from here.
Well, hang on. Steven's typing. Oh, it's straightened out. Oh, you don't hear any echo. All right, let us know if you hear the echo again, all right? Thank you so much, buddy.
We are streaming monaural audio, which is Criterion's way of fancy way of just saying mono. I like when you buy a Criterion thing, they really make you feel special. I recently spent more money than I planned to on the latest Criterion sale, and I had to pay like extra money for import fees, which really fucking sucks. That's just nature when you buy in Canada. But once they came in, I was really happy with my selection. So,
but, I'm sorry, where was I? Oh yeah, Denis Villeneuve's Dune. The novel has been considered by many to be unadaptable, but thankfully I was able to go into this story not reading the original novel, not seeing the original David Lynch version, or seeing the TV miniseries. And the movie is about Paul, more specifically Paul Atreides, of the Atreides family, who recently accepted the rite of passage, or more so the right to rule the land of Arrakis, where they plan on harvesting spice which they use to power the fuel space weaponry, space travel, and many other items. Basically, whoever controls the spice controls the universe.
It's a psychoactive thing, and it's considered the most precious material in the universe because... yeah, without it, space travel is not possible.
Exactly. And the
film makes you wonder how they got there in the first place.
Well, a lot of people were born there, and they probably just figured out, like, they used the spice to use space travel, and then they branched out to other places to go, like, hey, you can use spice to travel now.
And I think what's been difficult about Dune is it is such a dense novel, and there's all this lore leading up to it. This basically this is humanity 10,000 years in the future. And a lot has happened up to this point. And I've been familiar with the lore for a while. I'd watched a lot of videos for Quinn's Ideas, and I did start reading books some time ago, but I've been off and on because I had a certain amount of trust that I wanted to put into Denis Villeneuve. Because when I heard he was attached to the project, I'm like, okay, this is gonna be like the definitive cinematic experience for it. And maybe that's a lot of preloading and being presumptive or whatnot, but I like to go into something and experience it for what it is without having any preconceived notions. But at the same time, with Dune being such dense material, I kind of wanted to explore that world and create my own ideas of it. in there. So I was kind of pulled back and forth between it, where some friends of mine have been really egging on me about the book, saying, "Oh, if you haven't read the book, then you know nothing about it." But I think there is something to be said about just wanting to see the film for what it is and how it's put together, and how do you experience it as someone who is uninitiated.
Yeah, exactly, and it's also very old source material too. In fairness, like a lot of my friends were just in awe when I said I didn't read Dune. It's like, how could you not read Dune? Dune's from the '60s, but you gotta
And
understand, I'm not particularly much of a reader, so I'm not really a part of that community where all of the big books are just experienced by everybody in said community. So somehow I could just dodge it.
I felt a bit ashamed that I just can't sit down and read something sometimes, although I have in short bursts. But I do experience it in other media, like I've listened to an audiobook or people giving the whole backstory. And when people kind of present it in that kind of way, it kind of lets my imagination flow, and I can generate other ideas of how the world is. And so there's different ways of kind of taking in that material, although it is through filters of other people interpreting it. Um, that said, I think this film is a great start. It is only the first half of the book, which I think is the proper way to do it, because it is because the book itself is divided in two halves, and
oh really?
Yeah, and there's there's so much that goes into that storytelling, and I think it's important that it's given the time to be fleshed out. I think the original cut of this movie was 3 hours.
It was almost 4 hours from what I heard.
Yeah, and then this version that we got is only 2.5, and some of those scenes, from what I've read in the first half of the book, did feel almost a little rushed.
A little bit.
But I'm sure that there's more footage out there, and I would like to see a longer director's cut of even just this half of the book, because the story is really fascinating. And they actually came out with a graphic novel of Dune a little bit ago, and I was looking at that, and it's fantastic. It's its own interpretation of the story, and it pulls directly from the book as well. But all these give you just different lenses, different looks into this world, and it's a really fascinating world where there is no AI. Humanity had war with AI many millennia ago, and they just barely came through alive. So they made it a rule that we will not create a machine that replicates man. And so they've been developing for many years these intrinsic human traits, and that's why people have, psychotic powers. That's not the word. That's the word I'm looking for.
And it also explains why they use spice as a resource for travel instead of relying on technology to do so. And it makes the world more interesting and fascinating because, it gives an excuse of why they'd rely on books and why they'd rely on physical technology. And it also gives a decent narrative excuse for so much boots on the ground combat, where it doesn't feel completely far-fetched. It's no, this just feels like an organic extension of the world. It really feels like you're in a different, almost alternate future where we don't have to rely on technology so much. And it really does help it branch out apart, at least a little bit, from other science fiction in that regard.
It feels like the whole world building is so fascinating, and they do such a damn good job with the set design. Some people have complained about the flat kind of color grading. I think it's actually the set design and everything actually is kind of high contrast. But
they make all the use out of the limited color palette, though. They get every single inch out of it.
They've absolutely maximized the impact of having an almost monochromatic color palette at times. But there's shades of beige, shades of blue, and you really appreciate every scene feels alive when you watch this, and you need to see it on the biggest screen possible. Telekinetic, that's the word I was looking for. They have these there's different sects of people that have developed their own mental powers, and that's kind of very aspiring. It shows that we have these maybe deep-seated powers that are potential in our evolution, that if we worked on and honed in on, we could become. There are these characters in there called mentats, and they're basically human computers. And I really like the way that they executed the design of them, where they just look like normal people, but they roll their eyes into the back of their head,
and they click their heads.
And then they're making these complex calculations you wouldn't think would be humanly possible, but these particular people have been training this for many, many generations.
Yeah, it's details like that I absolutely love. Like, that's what makes the world building so engaging, is that they really strike that balance of giving just enough exposition so you aren't lost, but also leaving a lot to visual storytelling and showing instead of telling. Like, the Bene Gesserits, for example, like, they never go into huge details about the power they have over other cultures or how their powers work, but that's a big part of what makes them so fascinating. And the way the Harkonnens, it's a bit of a spoiler, but not really, because it's a very early scene on in the movie. The way they talk about them and the way they try not to make them distrust them in any way, like, it cements like an intense relationship between the characters. You don't need too much exposition to explore that. It's very cleverly developed.
Yeah, and I love the visual storytelling. How even if you don't know what the Bene Gesserits are or who Mentats are, like I just kind of explained a little bit of them, but those are just in-world things. But I like when you just experience a story unfold and you learn about these little things over time. You hear just people mention in passing without making very clear exposition. How does that emotionally rope you into the world? And that's what I wanted to experience into this, with just having basic knowledge of the background. And that's exactly what I got from it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm geared up to go see it again, hopefully tomorrow in IMAX. And
Fingers
I'm
crossed.
so looking forward to it. The first time I went to in a normal screen with recliners, and the problem is if you're in recliners, they get a little too comfortable. So like somewhere in the last half, I kind of nodded off a little bit. Not because the movie was boring, quite the contrary. It was because it was like 10, 11 at night at that point, and I'm in a cozy chair in a dark
It's a very
theater.
like transcendental slow burn experience, kind of like Blade Runner 2049 was on top of all that.
And it's weird, like Denis Villeneuve is explaining his thought process behind the Gom Jabbar scene, which is a very essential scene in the first book. And I'm not going to go into detail about it; just go watch it. But he was talking about how when Lady Jessica is using, or no, the Reverend Mother, whatever, when they use the voice, and how his experience almost becomes a narcoleptic. And I really liked that idea and the way they executed it.
It's a very different feel than what you'd expect from like a typical science fiction, and little details like that help it stand out all the more. One of my biggest concerns going in was I was so afraid it was going to be a style over substance experience, but I was surprised by how much I like resonated with the characters and the world, and Paul's struggle throughout the story that I won't really spoil was something I was enveloped in. One of the many things this film accomplishes that, the new Star Wars films kind of left me lacking in that regard. If we're going to compare to Star Wars like everybody else is, we might as well go full in. Was just that sense of oppression, like the sense that the heroes are always just barely getting by. And that like oppressive atmosphere not only like makes you care about the characters a lot more, but it also makes it a lot harder to watch on a second watch, where a lot of bad things happen in the story, and the film's atmosphere really centers around the fact that the characters almost know what's going to happen, but there's just nothing they can really do to stop it. And that kind of feel to the atmosphere and tone is something Villeneuve's always been good at, and I'm really glad his style in that regard could shine for this production.
Oh yeah, and I love how it just brings you into the world, and this whole civilization feels like an ancient civilization, but in the distant future. And I love that closeness to nature, even though it's on a distant foreign planet. Like just feel of it. It feels very organic, down to earth, or Arrakis in this case.
Yeah, that definitely reminds me a lot of Return of the Jedi in that sense, with the Ewoks and their bond with the natural world and their less advanced technology, and their kind of like need to survive above all else. But not only are they actual characters instead of teddy bears, but it's also so much easier to sympathize with the characters when they're actual people with their own personalities and beliefs and culture.
And let's be clear here, like this book influenced Star Wars undoubtedly. This came out in the 60s. And the first attempt to adapt this was from Alejandro Jodorowsky, and that was an unrealized project where they put so much money in the pre-production and the pre-visualization. It was such an ambitious vision. If you haven't seen Jodorowsky's Dune, I highly recommend that documentary.
Yeah.
And it also if you aren't sure about this film going in, but you have a little bit of interest, that film will really give you an appreciation for how difficult this has been to adapt. Um, they did eventually make one in the 80s. David Lynch was behind that project, and that was a very troubled project for David. He was trying to appease, the producers and all these people, and his vision kind of conflicted with the book, and it's what he would call a would-be Alan Smithy production, like, and David's an incredible filmmaker, an incredible artist. He just wasn't right for that film.
No.
It does have its own charm, its own quirks. It's like in a so bad it's good kind of way. But if you hear David talk about it, he doesn't like to talk about Dune because for him, he said he died many deaths. But I think ultimately what he got from it is always have Final Cut, and he pretty much just adapts with his own material.
Yeah, there was so much cut from that.
He's best at working with his own ideas.
Exactly. Yeah, so much producer interference. It was almost 3 hours long, but they had to cut down to about 90 minutes, which is ridiculous. It's like how Chapter 2 was basically cut in half. It was 2 hours and 15 minutes. It was originally going to be 4.5.
But yeah, I'm just so happy to see this project be this well realized. And this first half of the story is giving me so much hope for the second. And that's why I want to go see it as a moral obligation in the theaters many times while it's out. I want to give Daddy Villeneuve all my money till part 2 is as good as it can be.
Absolutely. How have we gone this long without talking about the music?
Oh my god.
It is, like, it's so different from his other work, but he puts enough of his own style in it that it feels like Zimmer, but it's so, like, transcendental feeling, and it adds so much to the atmosphere and the alien nature of every scene that it honestly might be his best work since Interstellar. Like, it's... Yeah. I can't stress enough how forgettable his score was for No Time to Die, and just how the complete opposite of forgettable the score is for Dune. Like
it's really, it's filled with all of his, like, there's a lot of the usual Hans Zimmer isms in this, but I love the use of the voices, this almost tribal kind of vibe in them. It reminds me of a lot of Dead Can Dance, but a lot more aggressive. And
I think, I could be wrong, I think the main singer of Dead Can Dance is one of the voices.
I wouldn't be surprised. I would be very delighted if...
Yes.
Oh man, her name escapes me, but she's one of my favorite vocalists who's self-trained.
Absolutely.
She has such a unique voice. If she was a part of this, that was meant to be. Like, she's phenomenal.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know what else to add. It's fantastic. My issues are very minor. Like you mentioned, there's a couple of characters that could have used more screen time, and I think my biggest issue is I hate when movies use text to explain the location of another place, especially in a science fiction movie. Like, nothing pulls me off an atmosphere more than when I'm getting enveloped in this unique world and all of a sudden there's a text explaining, oh, we're in the Baccae planet now. Really? The gray world with people having their heads bled out with a throat singer? No way. I couldn't tell that was a Baccae world. I really need the text to explain that.
I will say this film definitely feels like it's been trimmed in places, and I want to see a longer version of this film.
Yeah.
And I want to see him go absolutely no holds barred on part 2.
Absolutely. And supposedly there's going to be more action in part 2, but hopefully it'll be a balance. Hopefully it will be a balance, because there's some really impressive world building and character moments in this. Every single performance is fantastic. Sorry, Stephen, I know you're not a fan of Timothée Chalamet, but I think it was perfectly cast. Rebecca Ferguson is fantastic. Jason Momoa finally can act in a movie. There's not enough good things I can say about this. I was pleasantly surprised all the way through, and there's just nothing quite like experiencing it in the theater. But if I watch it on TV, I feel like I'll enjoy it just as much, if only a little bit less. And I'm getting,
that was a weird thing that people were pointing out, is how close in age Timothée Chalamet and Rebecca Ferguson are when they're supposed to be mother and son.
All the time in movies, though.
It does happen all the time. Timothée Chalamet is like 25, 26. Paul is supposed to be 15. And it's not uncommon that older people play teenagers, especially if they have to do very difficult stuff in the role, and if there's a lot of emotion put into it, it's hard to rely on child actors. And It can arguably unethical to have them go through those kind of things if the role calls for it. So I have no problem with that. Although if they wanted to recast someone that was younger or closer to that age, I was thinking of that one kid from Stranger Things who also has curly hair.
Finn Wolfhard.
Yeah, him. Like, if you wanted a more age accurate Paul, then you could have had him. But I think Timothée Chalamet does an all right job.
Yeah, and the thing is, he looks enough like a teenager that it doesn't bug me. Like he looks more like like early 20s than maybe 15, but it's much more convincing than Kyle MacLachlan.
I think the people that say his face are punchable may be projecting a little bit of jealousy, but maybe. I don't blame you either way.
I mean, he's dating both Zendaya and Armie Hammer in his movies, so maybe that's why they're jealous.
Probably.
Anyways, I'm giving this a 9.5 out of 10.
Yes, I'm right up there as well. I'm also giving it 9.5, and it'll probably be rounded up even to a full 10 once I see it again.
Nice. Thank you, Mr. Villeneuve. I should have never doubted you, Villeneuve-chan. But next up, we have 3, not 1, not 2, but 3 different Tim Curry movies. Hang on, I need to change the... There we go. Alright, so I need to get rid of the text.
Alright, we're 42 minutes in and we're finally getting into the actual episode.
I mean, to be fair, the first part was going to be planned in the actual episode. Which one of us... I feel like you should discuss the Rocky Horror Picture Show, because I know there was a bit of a history with this, with your family. So, take it away.
So, Rocky Horror Picture Show is the 1975 film, absolute cult phenomenon. Started off as a Broadway play, and then it was eventually written and developed into a film that my mother had seen over 20 times at the Roxy Theater in Toronto when it was running there. This is just something that she has been in love with for years, so I've been familiar with the music even though I hadn't seen the film. She's had the records, and if you see in the Discord, she has this lovely little watercolor painting that she made with some lyrics written on it that unfortunately got a bit water damaged, although it's fitting because on there he talks about riffraff saying you're wet. So I don't know, it kind of works in favor, but we try to preserve that as best as possible. She would just keep that in the record sleeve with it. So I've been more than familiar with this film for years and years. My first time actually sitting down and watching it was with my parents at the ripe age of 12, which is a really weird experience actually, because you're just getting, sexually awakened, sexually aware of things, and you're sitting there with your parents watching all this flamboyancy on screen. It's a lot. It's a lot to take in. But it also felt like a weird kind of initiation, I suppose, into this.
Some repressed feelings in your family.
No, it's all good. If anything, I think this film it's almost like pop taboo. Like it takes these taboo things, but it shows that it's okay to feel things and accept who you are. And I think that's kind of the overall positivity of this message. For people that are outside of the norm, this film's like a nice warm hug. If I had 2 words to describe this film, it would be wholesome debauchery.
That's an interesting way of putting it. Yeah, this is gonna be the hardest part of review.
That said, I've seen. If it weren't for the music, it would very much be like a B movie, and that's not an accident because a lot of the references in this are to like B movies.
That makes sense.
Like the first opening music is science fiction double feature. Dr. X will build a creature. There's lots of references to these old campy horror movies that aren't very good, but people love them anyway. And I feel like that's the overall energy with this. So it's kind of a take it or leave it kind of experience. I'm just cushioning all that because I know you're probably going to have some nitpicks to bring up.
That's, yeah.
Is this your first time seeing it?
I've seen it a couple times. Believe it or not, I've seen it when I was younger. I saw it again a couple years ago, and I saw it again this year, and I really don't get this film. And I'm actually excited to talk about it tonight because it feels like one of those cult classics where people only really like it for a couple aspects and nothing else, to me. Like, I feel like people only really dig it. Like, everybody I talk to about this movie who say they love it only really talk about Tim Curry in the first 20 minutes. With Time Warp, the Meatloaf cameo, the transsexual from Transylvania. But anything else in the movie, nobody talks about. And you know why nobody else talks? Gone.
Well, no. Why do you think no one else talks about that?
Personally, because I think the rest of the film is forgettable in comparison. Like, I personally not a fan of any of the other songs. Like, they're well composed. They're like good in theory. I don't think most of the actors can sing very well. A lot of the songs feel like, oh hey, we can normally talk here, but let's just make this a song because it's a musical and we need songs randomly in the movie for some reason, even though they could just talk it out like normal people. Controversial hot topic. Damn It, Janet is one of the most overrated songs ever made. Like, that is the epitome of the kind of song I hate in musicals, where it's like, you could just talk out in this scene, but we're gonna sing it very flatly, with very boring and repetitive lyrics, with a joke that plays out for too long.
God damn it, Ian.
It's funny for like the first 30 seconds, but that goes on for 3 minutes.
You know what? It's one of those things where you watch it, and you might feel secondhand embarrassment of the acting and whatnot, and there is that element to it. It's like you kind of roll your eyes, you kind of look away, but then you look back, and it's enduring. I am going to respectfully yet vehemently disagree with your points on the music. I think the music is phenomenal, and the singing is very played up and theatrical. Like, there's this kind of drawl that Riff Raff and his sister do, but that's very much in character for the characters that they're in homage to. These, it's very much like the Dracula, and like they're transsexuals from Transylvania. They're vampires. So there's these old school horror theatrics that are being thrown into the music, and I can see how like the different voices can get on your nerves. Like, you go from this kind of drawl to this guy kind of almost shouting, screaming,
and then there's just really high flat register. And then it's just really flat from the protagonist.
But all of that is intentional. Like, they're all talented singers, and that's for intentional theatrical effect, and it is in character. So it's not due to lack of talent or technique. They're applying these like characteristics to their voices to create this effect.
Then it's one of those.
It's a little cheesy, but that's kind of the point. You're saying that the rest of it's forgettable. There are scenes like the pacing and the storytelling is a little chaotic, and that's to a fault. But the music in the last half is what really got to me when I was younger, and I always resonate with it emotionally. Like the whole "Don't Dream It, Be It," like that bit of music, and then also "I'm Going Home." Those two particular pieces always touch me emotionally. For whatever reason, I'm not even sure why, but that to me is what made the whole film.
See, like the "Dream It, Be It," like to me, like, music is very subjective. Obviously, it resonates differently with people, more so than any other medium for sure. But to me, it kind of just felt like every Broadway musical song has that moment. Has that kind of song where it's like, oh, just, don't let your dreams be dreams. Just follow your dreams. That's what you gotta do. Just be who you really are. I just feel like I've seen that in so many movie musicals and play musicals. Like, even like while I was in high school, that before I actually watched a movie, it just felt like every other one of those songs just a little more forgettable than compared to something like Sweeney Todd. Where, like, the Mrs. Lovett talks about her dreams of being with, I'm sorry, Sweeney Todd. I am blanking out tonight. Just, dreams about being with Sweeney Todd, but I feel like there was more emotion to that song. I feel like that was more resonating. Maybe it's because I cared about the characters a lot more. I really don't.
Did you see Sweeney Todd before you saw this?
I don't think so. I think I saw it after. I can't remember. It was very close to each other because we were just looking for Like, we were looking for movies for Halloween around, like, the age of 13, 14, and those were just available at the DVD rental store. So that just
fair enough.
bought both of them. I don't remember what I watched first, but yeah, it's music I have a problem with, and this is another part where you're probably going to punch me. I do feel like this movie was a deliberate attempt to make porn and put it in a movie theater.
How so?
Well, I get that they're vampires. I get that it's kind of tongue-in-cheek and making fun of how horny vampires are, but did we really need, like, long, uncomfortable scenes of the butler and the maid kissing each other and the guy running
was
around?
To the plot.
How was that essential for the plot? I generally want you to tell me how that was essential for the plot.
It's fun. I don't know.
Exactly, and like the guy running around in his underwear, and the jokes about the main Tim Curry's character fucking both the main characters. Like,
well, actually, this is something I pointed out. How when he goes to sleep with Susan's character, it's kind of like shocking and horrific that she's committing infidelity, and he's trying to coach her into it. And then he goes and does it with Brad, and then it's funny.
It's kind of funny, but it's like more drawn out than it needs to be, and I feel like
this is a film that I think is in effect greater than a sum of its parts, because breaking it down, it's on thin threads of it just working in as the cult phenomenon it is. Like the pieces, they're very clearly kind of sectioned together. But I think the overall effect is greater than the sum of its parts. Like, you can tell that there was some cheapness in the production. Although I do think that they did a good job with the production design.
It looks nice. There's some great set design and some clever use of lighting. That's way more than I expected for this kind of movie.
You can tell they have limited budget, but they worked well with it.
Yeah, they did the most of what they had with it, and I think that's my favorite part. And Tim Curry, like spoiler, he steals all of these movies, by the way. He steals every single one of them we're talking about tonight, except for Dune, of course. And he is just... I actually think he's easily the best singer, but he's also... He just doesn't care. Like, he fully embraces, like, the weird nature of his character and has fun with it in a way that isn't, like... It's over the top, but it's not too over the top. I feel like he struck a great balance of a character that's kind of maniacal, but they just love being maniacal. It's really fun to watch.
He's by far the standout role, but I do want to give credit to the whole cast for committing to their roles. And, there's not a lot of people that would have this kind of courage to be on stage and be that expressive, especially for the time period this came out. Like, my mom was in love with this thing. She saw it 20 times in the theater. My dad was from the countryside, from a very kind of conservative area. So to him, it was all very shocking when he saw it.
It's like forbidden fruit.
But it's like that. That's kind of how their relationship. I don't know if that's what they came together over, but it's still they came from two different places, and they both meet in the middle to appreciate this thing. And I probably have some biases there, but the music, I think, is really ultimately what sells the story. Everything else would kind of almost fall by the wayside if the music wasn't good.
Time Warp was a great song. And Meatloaf
Time Warp's a fantastic song.
Did a good song
and
where he showed
those
up.
two pieces near the ends, they just have this emotional resonance that envelops me in every time. Like, Science Fiction Double Feature is a great song, and I love how it bookends the film.
All right.
It's one of those things where, like, the lyrics are not what's grabbing me exactly, but it's the way it's the way they're sung. Like, there's an emotion to them that feels very tangible for whatever reason.
I like the instrumentation behind it, but again, like, I'm just music's very subjective. I said I didn't like Miami Connections music. I should be burning in a pile of flames by now. But I really don't like the singing in this movie. Taekwon!
Like I said, it's very theatrical. So there's
maybe that's just not really my thing with musicals. But I love Sweeney Todd, and that's incredibly theatrical.
I think if we grew up with the films that this is referencing, if we went to drive-in theaters and saw these low-rate black and white sci-fi movies all the time, and like fair. I've seen some, but mostly we've looked at ones from the 80s, and this film is a send-up of those older films, and I think if we grew up in that time period, we probably would have a lot more appreciation for the little references, because it's weird. You hop into a movie like this, and you see all these things, and then you find out later, oh, RKO was a defunct, it's a now defunct movie studio, and that's how the original King Kong was made. So it's like we're kind of on the outside working in, where this film has references to a culture before our time.
That's fair.
So I think that's why there's probably some disconnect.
That's fair. And it doesn't help
I
that
know a lot of people my age that are really into this film, but they are theater people. So this is something that gets ingrained into that little subculture, that this came from the stage, and all good theater students know this. Know the production of this.
That's fair. And I'm not really a fan of horror movies and musicals all that much, so that's not really a good mix to go into this kind of film. Like, this is very much like a love letter to classic horror films, classic science fiction, lots of Frankenstein, and I'm pretty sure, like, the half-naked guy's like a joke on the Frankenstein monster, and there's references to Dracula, there's references to The Exorcist came out after this, right? Because it did kind of feel like parts of this were kind of making fun of that style of narrative.
I do have a hot take that I want to present.
Go on.
And this is after I saw it that I had this idea that I think Pink Flamingos walked so Rocky Horror could run.
Fair enough. I haven't seen Pink Flamingos, so I'll take you up on that.
Well, if you think Rocky Horror, like I think everybody would agree, its presentation of sexuality is kind of tame by today's standard, but some people would still find the presentation of it a little uncomfortable for whatever reason.
It's not that I find it uncomfortable. I just find it annoying.
Sure, it's a little, I don't know, garish. Pink Flamingos blows all this shit out of the water in terms of just the raunch of it.
Jodorowsky films definitely blow it off the water too.
It's just so explicit in Pink Flamingos, and for completely different effects. Like it's an exercise in bad taste, as the caption portrays, but it's almost charmingly so. It's weird how, like, I don't know. I don't know how they pull off doing nasty shit yet making you feel like you're in on the joke, and it's not hurting anybody, even though what they're depicting is pretty awful. I don't know how they pull it off. John Waters and David Lynch do the worst shit, but they feel like decent people.
Yeah, that's probably because they do the worst shit in their movies that they just vent it out, and by the time that's done, they're just like, oh, hey, how's it going? It's like, how the nicest actors always play villains. It's just they vent out all their angry energy into their work.
You can tell that they keep the relationships between people pleasant, and that way people like to work with them. And then it's like having a well-integrated shadow. All the darkness, all the anger, all the whatever goes into the art, and it doesn't, touch anybody else.
Agreed.
Anyway.
Well, those are my thoughts on the Rocky Horror Picture Show. I'm not a fan of it, but there are things I do appreciate about it.
And like I can understand anybody not being a fan of it, because it is a lot. Like, there's a lot that happens in it, but I don't know, the way that I experienced it, it felt like an initiation, almost felt like a rite of passage. So I went through a whole arc of feelings first watching it, and I kind of relive it every time. And there's just no other film that gives me this exact experience that I appreciate it for that in and of itself. And I like the music, and Tim Curry's phenomenal in it.
That is something I do appreciate about it. It clearly resonates with a lot of people. It has a huge cult following behind it. It flopped in theaters, but the VHS sales were ridiculous. I believe, like, they were insane. It was like something like 3 times the budget.
No, like, and it's crazy just how much of a following it has. And in fact, when you get the Blu-ray, I just bought the Blu-ray. This is the first time I actually had it on physical media, because most of the time we can just rely on the fact that it's going to be on TV around Halloween, which is when you want to rewatch it anyway. But on here, they have kind of a simulated theatrical experience where there's like a little window that shows you the props you're supposed to be throwing, because people bring props and they throw it at the screen. Like just when they get married, they throw rice. And the Room does this with spoons. But and then there's a little picture-in-picture window of the theatrical production alongside with the film, like perfectly timed to it. And it's just, I mean, it's bizarre just watching it all on one screen like that, but it does kind of show you what the whole culture has surrounding it. And this has been, and I think it might even still be considered to this day, the longest theatrical run in history, period.
Damn. Yeah, that
Like
explains a lot.
Because it's been just constantly on in theaters for like 40 or 50 years or something. Well,
Yeah.
not 50 years,
Yeah.
but like a long ass time.
After like it got its cult following in, I believe, the 80s, like they just kept putting it in theaters because so many people wanted to see like the crazy spectacle on the big screen, and that I do appreciate about the film for sure. But
yeah, there's like that initial allure with it being a taboo thing, and it's like a midnight screening, and it is almost like a pornographic allure, but I'd say the end result is more wholesome. Like,
that's fair.
I don't know.
It's not so much that, it's just I just didn't personally like most of the music in the film, and I think it's very terribly paced. It feels way longer than this.
I'm also biased because when I was in school in bands, we played Time Warp, and I learned it on, and I was playing it on bass guitar, and it's one of my favorite bass lines. So,
nice.
yeah, I really got into actually like learning to play some of the music from this film, and yeah, for a while it was like those last two tracks were on my playlist. Like, yeah, there's just emotions that it brings up that nothing else quite replicates.
Well, I'm really glad it resonated with you. But personally, I don't really get it outside some technical elements and Tim Curry. It's just nothing else really stands out in the film for me. I'm glad it stands out for a lot of people, but I just can't get behind the hype on this one. 5 out of 10. Like I honestly can't give it a higher score than that. That's the best I can do. Sorry, Tim.
I thought you'd give it at least a 6.9, and I would consider that low ball.
It was tempting, but I gotta be honest with my review scores.
True, and reflecting on the filmmaking, there's some interesting setups in here, but like I said, it's greater than the sum of its parts. Like, this would be a forgotten B movie if it weren't for the music and if it weren't for the theatrical production that inspired it. This would be like just a weirdo, bizarre kind of movie.
Although it could have a cult following for that alone. Like, especially in this day and age of low random humor, like so many people are attaching to those kind of movies.
And as far as movies go, it's not my favorite movie of all time, but it is one of those things I just like to watch around Halloween. It just feels like the right time and place for it.
Yeah.
But I don't go out of my way to watch it otherwise.
That's fair.
It's not my favorite movie of all time, but it's one that I like to watch every so often, every year. Yeah, 6.9 just feels like the right rating for it.
Perfect. Mind if I introduce Legend?
Go ahead.
All right. So, Legend from 1985, directed by the once great Ridley Scott.
Oof.
Very, very interesting production on this movie. Supposedly, the film was originally going to be a lot darker. There was going to be blood. There was going to be jump scares. The monsters were going to have much more terrifying presence. There's going to be sex scenes in the movie, too. But along the lines of the production, they decided to tone off that down and just instead head for a more horror-esque direction with, fantasy elements and lighter elements, so it's not too intense for audience members, which is apparently what the director's cut is like. And what we got in the theatrical cut was more of a generic action movie. But Ridley Scott still stands by the fact that the director's cut is the true vision of the movie. But at the same time, in the Discord chat, we were recommended by tons of people to watch the theatrical cut, so obviously people have very different opinions on what this film was truly meant to be. And the story itself is kind of generic fantasy fare. If you've seen any fantasy epics from the 80s, you kind of know where it's going. So the villain, played by Tim Curry, is the Lord of Darkness. And basically, he wants a unicorn horn so he could bring darkness back to the realm and reclaim Earth for himself. While a hero played by Tom Cruise and a princess played by, what's the actress's name? I keep forgetting her name. She's not really in anything anymore, but she was big in the 80s.
He was only, I think, 17 when they filmed this too, right?
Yeah, that makes certain scenes a little creepy, which we'll get into. Mia Sara, Lily, as they kind of both tried to find the last unicorn and return the horn back to its rightful unicorn to restore order and balance to the world. So it's kind of generic, like, bad guy wants to take over the world, but it's very clearly like a homage to high fantasy. But
Yeah.
I think it's for that reason that the film was so poorly received. It barely made any money at the box office. It was demolished by critics. That's a 30 Metascore rating, which, by the way, despite my issues with the film, I think that's way too harsh. Like, it's not.
I saw a 17% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, like that is ridiculous. But I honestly don't think the film's that bad. I have plenty of issues with it. But I have to admit, this was probably the best Tim Curry film we're talking about, which isn't saying much, but saying something. What do you think?
Well, I have had the hardest time trying to find a version of this film that I could like watch and stream properly. So I never really, I didn't get to see all of it, unfortunately. Like, I'd find a version and the audio would be off sync, or the one day our internet just cut out completely. So I just had a terrible time actually watching the film, so I can't really comment on it. So in lieu of that, I just decided to do a little bit of research, and apparently this has been true in the history of Ridley Scott films, but there's like multiple cuts of this. There's the theatrical version, there's his director's cut, but there's two different theatrical versions between Europe and the United States, and depending which version, and there's so many minor changes between them that depending which version you watch, you might have almost seen a completely different film in terms of like how certain scenes play out, because the American one kind of makes things a little sexier and a little more violent, and the European one is a little more tame and maybe nuanced in some ways between scenes to scenes. And there's this great video kind of talking about it, and these two people talking about the version of Legend that they grew up watching and what they liked and disliked about both. And there's probably a good version of the film somewhere between all those, but yeah, your experience definitely may vary depending which version you watch. And I think, unfortunately, this film does fall in that Generica realm, because it is just called Legend, which is a very generic title from the get. This easily gets lost in like the bargain bin with Labyrinth and a bunch of other fantasy films. And Conan the Barbarian or Willow or all these like fantasy films from the 80s, which have their own kind of aesthetic to them. But what's cool about it is practical effects were getting better and more like cost effective, and these effects people were wanting to show off. And I have to say, the production design, the cinematography, and a lot of stuff at the time were fantastic. I think that's by far some of the best parts of this film.
Oh, absolutely.
And being a Ridley Scott film, it looks great. Like, I love the way they filmed it.
Yes.
Even if what's happening isn't that exciting or that unique or that interesting. This almost feels like the extended cut of the Unicorn Dream in Blade Runner. You know,
some people like think that the unicorn footage was straight up lifted from this movie. Some people actually think that.
I wouldn't be surprised if there was some, seed of inspiration that at least came to that. But this almost feels like this entire film happens in Deckard's dream.
It feels like a fever dream.
It feels like a fever dream. It's like you watch it on fast forward, and it feels like you just dreamt an entire film that doesn't exist, except it does exist, and it's called Legend. It's like a film you made up in the middle of the night while dreaming.
It feels like a D&D game I cooked up on the side, but just never got around to running. It has that vibe to it. It also reminded me a lot of Legend of Zelda, which a lot of people think this was a huge inspiration for that game series. And there's one part where they're climbing up a big tree, and all I can think of is they're going into the Great Deku Tree. And I mentioned that, my mom's like, "What?" It's like, "Oh, it's from Legend of Zelda." I was like, "Oh, I don't remember that from Legend of Zelda." It's like,
I could definitely see there might have been some inspiration. Someone in Japan who was developing that game might have watched it and took some ideas from that. Like, at least visually. Like, there's some great visual ideas. I think Tim Curry's whole costuming and his
fantastic.
It's absolutely. Like, he just looks like a sweaty ass muscular devil.
And he spent 9 hours preparing the makeup for that every day. And on top of that, he had to wear stilts that made him almost 1.5 feet taller. So he has to like uncomfortably balance all of that while trying to be incredibly expressive with this makeup, which, yeah, good choice getting Tim Curry for that, because he is a very expressive actor. I remember watching, I don't know if it was Nostalgia Critic, but it was a video on Cat in the Hat, and him mentioning that, the Grinch from How the Grinch Stole Christmas is way more expressive than, the Cat in the Hat, because Jim Carrey is an incredibly expressive actor who can change like every emotion on his face in a whim, so it shows more through all of the makeup compared to Mike Myers, who like barely expressive at all because he's just not that good at expressing his emotions in comparison. So you really do need an actor that can pull it off.
There might be something with the makeup, but it might be something to do with the makeup, but also the whole body expression. Jim Carrey definitely flails his arms around a lot more effectively than Mike Myers.
And someone like Tim Curry is like a very expressive man, so even buried under all of the makeup, he can still unleash a personality, and I'm pretty sure that's his voice. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's his voice.
It does sound like his voice. I don't know if it's been pitched down or if he's modulated
for sure,
somehow.
But I'm pretty sure it's his voice.
He definitely sounds like he's doing a lower register kind of thing.
Definitely sounds like he is a villain of sorts.
There's a little bit of Fry in there, just ever so slightly, because, you know, if you meet the devil, you think he's going to have like this low gravelly kind of thing going on, right?
Exactly.
And he kind of does that. And I think he does an effective job embodying darkness, and that's his, like, he's literally darkness.
And he's also like incredibly evil, but he kind of knows it. He kind of enjoys it. Like there's a part where she says, "You're an animal," and he just smirks, and then like that is like so deliciously over the top that it's like Tim Curry knows exactly what he's doing with this character.
I'm also wondering, so like this is, I think, obviously a film made for younger kids, right? Like it's meant to be, it was like maybe it was meant to be darker at some point, but then when they decided to tone it down, were they thinking that this was meant for like young kids to watch?
Yeah, they wanted to make it PG friendly and tone down the violence a lot. There's like when they're climbing the rocks in the underworld, those weren't originally rocks. They were originally dead bodies that they hastily put together to be rocks to make it more kid-friendly. But if you look very closely, you can clearly see they have, like, heads in them. But I also think that's kind of a happy accident, because it's like, wow, this formation is so strange and so alien, and it fits in with the environment. But, you know, if you look in the behind-the-scenes story, it's literally just, oh, shit, we gotta make it look like rocks, so it's appropriate for kids. And I kind of wonder if maybe the gnomes were kind of meant to be like kid comic relief characters, because like they're very dumb sense of humor, like a lot of slapstick, a lot of yelling to go like, are we supposed to be quiet right now? Like that may have been like something they either added in or just gave more time to make it more appropriate for kids.
Yeah, probably. I mean, again, though, I don't think I got to see those scenes, so I'm not entirely sure. I remember seeing this like a long time ago. But even then, it wasn't the entire thing. So this film kind of just exists in this like fever dream realm when I think about it, because I've only ever seen bits of scenes of it, and it feels like something that I dreamt of and cooked up in my mind at some point, and then just forgot about. So yeah, I can't really comment much, but it is a very lucid feeling kind of movie, at least in my point of view.
How do you feel about the music by Tangerine Dream and the composer of Alien?
Well, here's the interesting thing: is that this is the main difference between the British version of the cut, or the European version of the cut, and the American one. Is Tangerine Dream? That score was created for the American cut.
That's interesting.
And they originally had music by this well-renowned composer whose name escapes me.
Jerry
and it was
Goldsmith?
it was more of a traditional score
Really?
that had some synthesis in it, and producers were going back and forth on it, and they wanted to try to make the scenes feel lighter, I suppose, and not so dark.
We gotta make it feel more 80s.
and that's where they hired Tangerine Dream, I think, or maybe it was to create more edge. Either way. Yeah, there was completely different kind of feels between the two cuts, because they also changed the music out by Tangerine Dream, and they're a great band, but according to Wrigley anyway, and there's probably some consensus here that the original score is better fitting for the film, because it was like the first instinct to go with those scenes of what felt right. And then this is kind of a general thing that when you take temp music, or you practice editing with temp music, and then you have someone come in to rewrite it and make something that sounds similar but isn't, it completely changes the feel of like an edit. So I always stick with whatever, like if I'm going to use music, I know what it is ahead of time, or I have someone write for it, and just commit to that initial idea, because that's going to be what works best most of the time. Just trying to work on something and then change out the music last minute will completely change the feel of it.
Exactly. It's hard to say for sure, like, which version. Like, again, like, some people prefer the theatrical cut, some people clearly prefer the director's cut. It depends on people's vision of the film. And the music, yeah, it's dated, yeah, it's kind of cheesy, but on the other hand, I also kind of appreciate that this is a fantasy film without, like, a generic orchestral soundtrack. It does help it, like, stand out a little bit more, and I think the songs they made for the Underworld in particular, like, really do add to the atmosphere. There's a scene, I don't know if you've seen this from the version you watched or how much you've seen of it, but there's a scene where the princess is dancing with another, like, a dress, but it's just a dress, and that is easily the best scene in the movie. Like, I wonder if that's part of the original vision, because it's, like, very creepy, very eerie, very atmospheric, but also kind of, like, beautiful in a way, and it's easily like the best scene, but it's also like a 1-minute scene, and then we see Tim Curry awfully CGI out for a door. But then Tim Curry's amazing and makes up for it. But I'm being really generous to this film. There is a lot of problems with it, I will admit.
Was it CGI? I think it's more of an optical effect.
I don't know if it's a combination of early CGI and optical effects, but it's the only effect that does not hold up.
I don't think CGI was super practical these days. I mean, there was some early CGI in, like, the first Dune, and that has not aged well. Also, Labyrinth had, like, early
young
use
Sherlock
of
Holmes
CGI for, like, the owls and whatnot. So you have to think about that. That's the caliber of what you're talking about here. I'm pretty sure that was an optical effect of him coming through the mirror.
Probably, but either way,
they definitely improved on that concept with The Matrix.
Yes.
Some years later.
Yeah, for sure. But the main characters, like, I get that it's a high fantasy. I get that they're meant to be as good as possible, but could you maybe make them a little less one-dimensional, a little less lame? Like, why did you have to give Tom Cruise the, oh boy, I'm this naive child. I'm happy to go over here and help save the princess. Ooh, this really dumb, obnoxious voice that's, like, supposed to make him sound innocent, but he just ends up sounding a lot more annoying.
And what's weird about, like, Tom Cruise in this movie is before this, he was in Risky Business, being, like, this swindling teenager. And this was before, this was after he did Risky Business. And then this was before he got into Top Gun, which is where his career really kind of took off.
Yeah.
But this is a Tom caught in the middle of those two character
mid-career crisis.
It's just like it's like he's this teenage. I'm at a loss for words.
Yeah, fair enough. Also, it does that thing I hate in the theatrical cut. I haven't seen the director's cut, so I'm only counting the theatrical cut where they explain that, oh, the main character and the princess have been in love for a very long time. I'm just like, oh, so now we have an excuse to not show any chemistry between the characters and establishing their relationship in any way, shape, or form. We're just gonna cut to the chase. Yeah, it really makes me feel for these characters when I get no establishment or feel for their background for each other, and they have no chemistry in this film. Tom Cruise looks incredibly uncomfortable around her in every scene. Like, it just gave me a secondhand embarrassment every time they pretended to be in love with each other. And it's also one of those, yeah, we're in love with each other, I love you, instead of just, having any kind of chemistry whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. And there's also a slight difference in the cuts that I remember seeing the video. In the American one, there's a shot where it cuts to, like, they're kissing in the woods, which doesn't, I don't think, happen until much later in the European cut. But it happens earlier on in the American one, and then it also cuts to, like, a shot of the sun, which implies they're doing more than just kissing.
Yeah, that's the version I saw.
Yeah, and it's like, it kind of takes away this idea of her being completely innocent, and apparently the European version of it just does that kind of. It's a very cliche kind of character arc story, but it does it a little better in the European one, where they decide to sex it up and make it more violent in the American one.
It is 80s Europe, so yeah. Oh man. So apparently in the director's cut, the only change I know about is the ending is very different. Tom Cruise and the princess separate at the end. Like Tom Cruise is so ashamed of what she did that they actually don't get together at the end. But that definitely feels like a Hollywoodized decision where it's like, no, we need them to be in love and happy by the end of it. So happy ending. We're gonna have characters wave in the background, and I love the look of this film, but the use of there was so much slow motion. I was telling my mom as I was watching it, this film would be half an hour long if it wasn't for the slow motion. Like, it's so excessive in the theatrical cut, and after a while it just took me away from it and became annoying after a while.
And I think the European, so I think the version you saw was only like an hour and a half, right?
Yeah, just about.
The European one is just under 2 hours, so there's some extra material in that as well.
Interesting. I don't know
like
how
hour
long this was.
53 minutes.
I don't know how long this was, honestly. Like, it felt pretty short. It felt pretty brief, but yeah, I was gonna say, like, they get to the bad guy's castle pretty fast. I was like, normally in these movies, there's a bit of a journey to get to the bad guy's castle, but you know, in this, it's just like, yeah, we'll just murder a hag, and
they usually have to go across some mountains and in like 3 other climates before they get there.
Yeah, and that's part of the fun. It's like we feel like we're going on this epic journey and this epic adventure. Here, it's like, oh, we're gonna make a left, and there's the bad guy's tower. We'll kill a hag instantly. There you go. It's like there's no tension here. We're just at the bad guy's village, and I wonder if the director's cut fixes that as well. And the more I'm talking about it, the more interesting the director's cut sounds, guys. I don't know if it was a good move to get me to watch the theatrical cut. I'm gonna have to check out the director's cut and check your facts on this one.
Well, speaking of facts, I decided to look into trivia because I'm running out of things to talk about.
No, there's some very interesting trivia, so go for it.
Widely rumored to have been a source of inspiration for Shigeru Miyamoto's classic game, The Legend of Zelda. Okay, yeah, you mentioned that.
Yep.
Filming was interrupted twice. Firstly, by the studio burning to the ground, and secondly, the death of Tom Cruise's father. Oh shit!
That is unfortunate.
No, man, that's terrible for Tom Cruise's dad, absolutely. But also the fact that they had to build an entire forest inside a studio, and then it burns to the ground.
And they had to rebuild it again for reshoots, like very hastily.
Yeah, so you know, stuff like that can throw a production off. Maybe there wasn't much to the story to begin with, but you know, trouble happens to production. So when we, criticize a movie, I do like to understand how this went about, and if they had trouble like this, then maybe I'm a little more forgiving in certain ways because those are. But this is also pretty standard across like Hollywood that there's always problems with sets, although some problems can be very very well avoided as of more recent events have shown.
Fair enough. What would you give Legend? From what you remember, what would you give Legend out of 10?
I'd give it a very hazy 5. There's some beautiful cinematography. There's probably some interesting moments there, although again, I barely saw it. Just because every time I tried to put it on, something kept interrupting it, or something. There was something off about it. It's almost like the powers that be was trying to prevent me from watching the film for whatever reason.
Trying to repress your memories.
No, I mean, you know, and I like to appreciate art for what it is, and I love the cinematography in this. They definitely nailed the look of like a high fantasy film. This is perfect material if you want to take like a high fantasy like reference when creating art, or you know, remixing the music video, or making your D&D campaign. This is a great visual reference to steal from, because they absolutely nailed the look. But you can probably flesh out the story and make it a little more interesting than these archetypes that they show in here. But you know, if you're into high fantasy and you just want another film to add to your high fantasy shelf and to take ideas from, this is definitely a movie to.
That's fair.
In that genre.
I'm kind of with you on this one. I think I enjoyed it a little bit more than you did, but more so from a guilty pleasure perspective. Tim Curry is great in the film, but nobody else is. The technical elements are great, but the main characters are so forgettable and one note. You don't care about their relationship at all. And the music is great at parts, but very cheesy in others. But also, there's a charm to this movie that, it's kind of bad, but in that lovable 80s corny kind of way. Like, there's hurt behind it, and that's more than what you can say about some bad movies now.
It's just kind of like mediocre a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Although I do feel remiss we're not getting Stephen Beason's commentary on this.
I genuinely want to know why you gave this a 9 out of 10, Stephen.
Oh, so I'm reading his letterbox, just the little one blurb letterbox. The best letterbox reviews are like one sentence hot takes.
Oh, he says,
"This is what the Green Knight should have been."
They're going for completely different things, man.
You're gonna have to qualify that. Like, I'm sure that's probably just written for clicks. But you're gonna have to qualify that because this is nothing remotely.
Yes, please
like
do.
that.
If you're listening to this, give us a fleshed out letterbox review. Like I enjoy them both for different reasons, but I think they're going for different perspectives. Unless that was a good meme, then of course, good meme on you, sir. And I'm giving this meme a 5.5 out of 10, but I give it with love.
Yeah, I'm definitely more lukewarm to this than cold.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair enough.
It's a cozy 80s fantasy movie.
Exactly.
That's visually well presented.
Would you like to introduce 1990s It?
Go for it.
I was gonna ask if you wanted to introduce it.
It's all good. You can go ahead.
Fair enough. So this is an adaptation of Stephen King's cult classic It, focused around the creepy-ass clown known as Pennywise, who torments and kidnaps children, eats them alive. Sorry, that burp was not part of the script. And so this group of kids get together and basically find a way to stop the clown once and for all, because the adults just won't do anything about it. It's an 80s book, what'd you expect? But it also cuts back between that and the kids grown up, where originally they thought they killed Pennywise in the past, but Pennywise continues to haunt them as adults, and they have to figure out a way to stop him, or maybe uncover that he is unstoppable after all. So I've actually seen the 2017 version of It before watching this movie. Same. But I've heard a lot of praise for this version, and like they enjoy like the child performances, and they enjoy Tim Curry as Pennywise, but I legitimately think Tim Curry is the only thing of value in this movie. And this movie made me realize, wow, Pennywise is barely in It. But I think the main reason for that is the child performances in the 2017 movie, I think, are genuinely excellent. And the kids really carry that movie and give it so much heart. When you take that away and have kids that feel incredibly stilted and awkward and, in my opinion, terrible, which may be controversial, it takes away a lot from the film's heart, and the film just gets really, really boring until Pennywise shows up. It's interesting how the 2017 version kind of had the opposite problem for me, but this version, definitely the only thing of redeeming quality is Pennywise himself, and the rest of it is just boring and awkward, and they were clearly held back by the budget and the fact that it had to be rated PG, and it was excruciating to sit for me.
You have to remember, this was a TV mini-series originally.
I know.
And there's some formatting differences between when it was edited for TV versus when it was put together as a single long movie. So I always see this thing kicking around on the DVD shelves at Walmart every Halloween. It's like every Halloween they take these classic movies and they redistribute them with like a new cover. And I'm like, it's $5, I'll grab it this time. And so I did, just to watch it for review. And I like having physical media, plus it legitimizes me critiquing it because I actually own the damn thing. I financially invested into having it. You could definitely tell it was made for TV. There were some interesting like cinematography choices. I actually quite like the use of like wide-angle lenses. This would have been between a few different like formats. Apparently the DVD that I have actually, it's cropped to 16:9 from like a larger 4:3 negative that would have been the TV thing. So
yeah, I think that's what I got too for my copy.
Although it didn't look cropped, like the framing within the framing was actually quite well done, I'd say, for the time. And
yeah,
like I think that the way they set up things is quite cool. But that said, the characters are more forgettable in this version than they were in the remake. And I'm biased because I saw the remake first, but people A lot of people say that objectively it's better in many ways, but I think this film probably has a soft spot for a lot of people that saw it when
nostalgia.
they were younger. The director of this has been known to make a lot of horror sequels, so he's quite he's quite what's the word? He's a part of this genre. Yeah, and there's some really interesting but cheesy kind of transitions, like when the guy calls all his friends up, like the one architect who comes home, and he's like home drunk. He just won this architect award, and he drops it on the fucking pavement because he's drunk out of his mind.
Yeah, he's drunk acting. Oh man.
and then his the main person from Derry calls them up saying, "It's back." And just the way the camera pushes in and zooms, and the way it cuts to like a flashback, it's kind of unintentionally hilarious.
Yeah, the presentation of this movie, I can't stress enough how this movie. I get it was made for TV, but I can't stress enough how this movie looks like those weird, those classroom presentations you get for science class that were like made for TV, but they put it on a VHS tape for students, and like there's weird fades and long awkward takes. Yeah, Bill Nye the Science Guy, or like kids like talking about to the weather guy about the Weather Network. I can't stress enough how the presentation of the film is like those videos.
It's definitely of that era. It's definitely a product of its time.
I know, but like we talked about with Fred's,
all over this.
Yeah, like we talked about with Fred's, like there were, yes, that was a TV movie made with also a pretty small budget, but if you approach it the right way, there's so many clever ways you can work around the budget to make it seem a lot more believable. Like they used a clever implementation of real life footage they used in text where they probably couldn't get the narrator that day. They didn't shoot in too many locations. And it looks so much more realistic and believable than this movie did with probably the same amount of budget. I appreciate the gusto of how they went about this movie, but at the same time, somebody should have been like, our budget is $200,000. We can't shoot a spider. We can't shoot a Pennywise having like really sharp teeth without it looking really goofy. Like we need to. Somebody should have told them just to hold back ever so slightly, but at the same time, I appreciate the gusto behind.
Was the budget only $200,000?
It wasn't, but I'd imagine it must be pretty low. I'm gonna look it up.
I was gonna say, because I don't think that's a usable budget for productions like this.
No, they're fucking with me. No, it says $100 million. No,
wow.
What? Excuse?
I mean,
No. Hang on. No, that's not right. No, they're okay. Yeah, they were fucking with me. So
is that adjusted for inflation?
No, the budget is $12 million. Sorry, that was legitimately fucking with me. The budget was $12 million, but even that seems surprisingly high for this movie, to be honest.
I mean, it's a 3-hour miniseries special. They probably had a certain amount for each episode that it was. I don't know how many episodes it ended up being, but again, it was edited together as a movie after the fact. But also structurally, I think it differs from the book and from the new films, because I think if I'm correct, like the book is divided into two main bits, one with them as kids and the other with them as adults, and this tries to cut back and forth as flashbacks. So you first establish them as adults, so effectively you're in the middle of the story when the person's calling the back saying it is back. And then you get a flashback to them as childhood. You get a little bit of backstory of them in their childhood, and it parallels to, their adult life and what they're doing now. Mm-hmm. And that can work, and I think it's effective for the most part. But it is taking a risk by restructuring the source material to make it fit this format.
Especially considering since it is a TV show. Like, I think the way they approached it in 2017 would work even better. Because it'd be like a great cliffhanger. Like, ooh, what's going to happen in the next part? Pennywise is going to come back. Oh, man. This is so exciting. But the structure feels almost more suitable to a full movie, honestly. True. It just feels really confused. And this film is it does not earn its runtime whatsoever, in my opinion.
Here's the weird thing. It does feel like really long TV episodes. Like, it feels a little episodic. It feels like that kind of thing. It doesn't feel like a movie as you watch it.
True.
On the DVD that I have, it's actually a double-sided disc, and I thought it was main feature on one side and then extra features on the other side. It turns out they cut the movie in half, or at least, yeah, like they cut the movie in half. Like hour and a half was on one side, hour and a half was the other side. But when I was first watching it, the first side of the disc ended right when the one character was found to have cut himself in the bathtub, and that one woman is screaming. And that's like the one scene that I remember seeing on TV, like when I first tuned into this, like accidentally. And then it just ends there. It just ends hard cut, and you're back at the menu. And I thought that was it at first. I'm like, shit, is that how it ends? No credits, no nothing. Like
That's
it threw me through a loop. It didn't make sense. But then I remembered, oh yeah, this double-sided disc. I flip it over, and there's 90 more minutes left. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, Tim Curry's good in it, but it's kind of interesting they're going with different approaches with Pennywise in this movie and Pennywise in the new movie. Like here, he's kind of going for more like a modern serial killer. Like he's like, he's smiley and happy, but beneath the surface, something's wrong. Where in the new movie, like he's more of a creep, and it's that aspect that adds tension to the scene. But here, it's kind of more like a quiet tension, and that was interesting to watch. But man, like the 2017 version, the child performance in that when he's talking to Pennywise down the sewer is so much more convincing. Like the kid looks genuinely confused and uncomfortable. He stutters on his words. He like uncomfortably laughs at one point before he's just like looks in shock when Pennywise like smiles at him and shows his teeth a little bit more. But in the 1990 version, yeah, Tim Curry's great, but the kid is, "Hi, Pennywise. How's it going? I'm not supposed to talk to strangers." And it just takes away so much from the emotional impact of that scene, in my opinion. Yes, Tim Curry is great. Yes, it's better that, they shot it in broad daylight and made it look less like a typical horror scene. But the difference a child performance makes in that scene is astronomical, in my opinion.
Definitely. I think they've definitely made improvements on the performance-wise with the new one, even if it follows like your typical horror aesthetics. I like that this one has shows like horror happening in broad daylight, and it is a commentary, like the whole thing of how crimes against children are overlooked and they're not given a proper appreciation, because there's real creeps out there that take advantage of young people, and it's not good. And it's just kind of glazed over in the news. Sometimes, and I think that's this whole character is kind of a commentary on of.
Yeah, for sure. And the idea of like the victims being the only ones that can really stop it, while everybody else kind of ignores the problem, like that aspect I liked as well. But that's much better fleshed out in the new movie, where I cared about the child characters and their struggles, and the relationship with the main girl and her father was so much better handled in the remake. And I think a big reason is the R rating. It makes so much of a difference in the story. In all honesty, like the bullies like bullying the fat kid in this like feels like a scene from Back to the Future. It feels goofy and stupid, but in the remake it's like,
and the
holy
fat kid
shit,
isn't
like
that
he whipped
fat.
out a knife, he cuts the kid. It's really intense and hard to watch.
Oh, it is. I agree.
But here it's just like, it feels like a goofy Back to the Future 80s nothing scene, and I feel nothing from it. I feel no tension.
And the child actor in the new one that plays the fat kid, he feels more like an actual like poet or someone that wrote that poem. Like the kid they had in this doesn't feel like someone that would have written that. I don't know.
Exactly. Like he's a fat kid, but you get the impression he's smarter than he actually is. But here it's just like he might as well be the fat kid from the Goonies. He's just a fat, dumb, goofy, funny because he's fat kid.
I mean, I don't want to harshly critique the child actors, because they're doing their best, and they're still learning stuff. But this is also from like a long time ago, so the guy's an adult now, and they probably have their own views of how they performed growing up, and they probably look back and think, oh, I wish I could have done this better or whatever. But yeah, no, it's actually surprised me how similar this one is to how similar the remake is to this. Like there's so many similarities in the scenes and whatnot. They unfold, but
yeah, it shows that the new version was a love letter while also trying to do its own thing.
for sure, and trying to improve on the story. And I do think they
Oh,
did.
sorry, you are not coming through properly at all.
Sorry.
Oh, there you go.
Well, this film gave me an appreciation for how the new one has excelled, kind of where this took off, and also how difficult it is to adapt like really long Stephen King novels and any work of fiction for that matter that really gets large in its scope. Like the thing with Stephen King is that he takes like very almost cliche kind of settings and storylines, but then he executes them with such detail and finesse that it makes them all the more fascinating. Like he takes a very usual setting, but then just gives it this immense amount of detail, and so that lends itself to cinema very well because you can really hone in on some of those elements and make for a visual story. But as with his other films, they can either be very seriously good or very goofy and off the wall.
Yeah, man, and learning the budget. $12 million for this? I was willing to cut the film some slack for being like, okay, they probably only had like a couple $1 million or $1 million. $12 million? That's almost $25 million in today's money. The lighthouse was shot on film. They built a lighthouse out of scratch, and that film has a $5 million budget, and it looks so much more believable than this.
But you also have to adjust for inflation, though, right?
I know, but yeah, $12 million adjusted for inflation is $25 million today. Let me look up the budget of Fred's real quick. 400. Okay, so yeah, 400,000 pounds. 400,000 pounds. Let me adjust that for inflation real quick. Budget to US dollar. Let's see. Sorry, hang on a second, guys. This is important. I genuinely gotta. 2021 dollars. Inflation calendar. Here we go. All right, 400,000. That's about €1 million, and that's probably about $2 million US dollars. That's a sixth of the budget of it from 1990. There's no excuse. I'm sorry, there's no excuse. That honestly makes me like this 1990 movie a lot less.
Well, if you think about the lighthouse is 2 actors in one location.
That's not a fair comparison.
It's original, and it's original material to the writing, where Stephen King's it's a whole ensemble cast, 2 different age groups.
Yeah.
And it's a much larger scope. So
that's fair.
The ambitions of the projects are completely different. So
that's true, but Fred's like that has so much to it, so many characters, so many actors. They base stuff off of the Cold War. There's post-apocalyptic imagery. There's tons of content that there's probably real footage that they probably had to license to use. The difference that a director's vision and knowledge on the limitations of a budget can make. Like that's all I really have to gain from it, the 1990 version, because it's just so boring and way too long and so forgettable for me. I'm sorry. And the adult side of the story is somehow even worse. But in fairness, Chapter 2 was way worse than the first film. And I'm starting to think the adult side of the story is just really shit. I haven't read the book, but I have a feeling it kind of falls apart when it gets to the adults in the book as well. Because neither film has a good adaptation of the adult moments.
No, yeah, and that's the thing. Like, the biggest thing I remember about It Chapter 2 was the fact that Xavier Dolan has a cameo in the beginning, and it's kind of inspiring to see that the fat kid grew up and wasn't fat, but I mean, he doesn't look the same either, though.
No, I think that's true in both versions, though it's even worse in the second version. But the casting was fine. It's just they had nothing to work with at all. But that's true with the original movie as well. I was gonna give it a 4.5, but no, learning that it has a higher budget, I give it a 4. It has a lower ranking for me. The only thing I like about it is Tim Curry and like some of the music and some of the tension building. There's nothing else of value in this movie for me, so 4 out of 10. Really could not get with this movie. I could not wait for it to be over. I watched the 2017 It Chapter 1 again, but that's about as far as I'll go for Pennywise the Clown. I'll probably just Google the sewer scene every now and again.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, yeah, it wasn't really that much of a memorable experience for me. Like, it has its own kind of charm to it, being a lower rate kind of horror thing. I think the library scene was the best part for me.
I thought that was
for
terrible. But I thought it was terrible in the new movie too.
No, I mean it's like so just entertaining. Like,
oh, I see.
Not because it's good. It's just hilarious.
Fair enough.
I mean, that scene alone's a 6.9. Everything else, but like 4 or 5. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll stick with a 5 out of 10. Well,
like I get that people love this character. There's actually one person at work. I'll share a picture, but they took this Yeti mug that everybody got, and she took like pages from the book, tore them, and glued them on after like burning the edges, and this like zipper with Pennywise's face in there just gave it this whole It theme, which is kind of cool, and then covered in like epoxy resin. So I admire when people get really into this stuff, I guess, but I'm not a fan of clowns.
Yeah.
unless Tim Curry is in the makeup, otherwise.
Yeah.
Not a clown person.
Thank you so much for listening in, guys. If we never talk to you again, have a very happy Halloween. As Stephen mentioned earlier, our next episode is an episode that he voted for called Normal Sex Equals Boring, where we will be talking about David Cronenberg's Crash, Society, apparently a very underrated 80s body horror film that I'm excited to watch, along with Eyes Wide Shut, a film I haven't seen in a long time and I'm excited to watch again. I'm gonna try to watch Titan, but there's just no way to watch it in Canada, so I'll probably have to pirate it if I do watch it. But look forward to that next week, guys. Hopefully on Tuesday, potentially on Thursday, but either way, stay tuned. And is it Tuesday yet? Have a very happy, spooky Halloween, guys, and have a great night.
Hell yeah, I can't wait for next week. It's gonna be